Hi, welcome to Restore 2023. Today we're reading Mark's Gospel, chapter 2. Now we all know that life can be plagued by critics, and it was no different for Jesus. He was constantly trolled by scribes and Pharisees, ready to nitpick anything they disapproved of, and you can trace them here throughout this chapter. But Mark, you'll remember, is deliberately in your face about Jesus, isn't he? Right from his opening comment in chapter 1 that declared Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. He crams his gospel with Jesus' own allusions to his true identity, allusions which the critics often understand, but, and ironically, religiously reject. And this conflict escalates throughout the gospel, making the outcome inevitable, something of which Jesus is fully aware, because even as early as verse 19 in this chapter, he alludes to his death. In this chapter, the first pointer to his true identity is the authority with which he forgives a paralytic's sin. After all, as his critics rightly say, who can forgive sins but God alone? And so they do understand the significance of what Jesus is saying, but they dismiss it as blasphemy. Now, in fact, Jesus consistently related to people and interacted in them in ways that liberated them from the web of Pharisaic legalism. For example, by calling Levi to follow him and then sitting as a guest of honour at his table, Jesus crossed one of the Pharisees' lines. They expected him to keep himself clean from such people who, in their view, disregarded the law of Moses. But while his critics fumed, Jesus pursued the way of mercy. Then there's the matter of fasting. The law only required fasting on the Day of Atonement, but the Pharisees also prescribed it on Mondays and Thursdays. When they object to the disciples' failure to fast, Jesus refers obliquely to a season of grace. Now you remember, he had announced that the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And now, as a nod to his own specialness, he insists that this is not the time for fasting. But note in passing that he still gives an obscure reference to his eventual crucifixion. Once again, in the grain fields, he's shadowed by his critics who find fault with his disciples because they're plucking heads of grain on the Sabbath. Jesus defends their action by quoting an occasion when David and his men were given the holy bread of the presence by the high priest. Hunger trumped legalism. And because he had quoted the Torah in his defence, his critics couldn't argue. But of course, Mark can't resist adding Jesus' final remark that the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath, because Son of Man is the title Jesus chose to be known by rather than Son of David. And of course, it was the Son of Man in Daniel chapter 7 verses 13 to 14 who was given everlasting dominion by the Ancient of Days.